Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'a sunnatahu ila yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to another episode of your weekly Islamic chat show, Guest of the Week, coming to you from Sharjah TV. I'm your host Ismail Bullock, and today we want to reflect on topics that are related to teenage, but from the aspect of some of the challenges and behavioral issues or temptations that may come in their way. And to do that with me is Ustaz Ma'awi Taka. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Again, teenagers can be a troublesome time. Can be a confusing time, I think, as well.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, alhamdulillah, my oldest is 20 now. So, and I got one that is 19 or 18, and another one is 16. So I've got a few at different stages. Literally, at one point I got some at the beginning, some in the middle, some at the end, some are finished. So inshallah, I have a lot to say today about puberty and that area. So I mean, I guess the first question is, in Islam, what is meant by puberty, I guess, or what's the Islamic position or view of the topic? So the first thing to understand is that I guess even the word, or even the phrase, even the category of a teenager, I don't think really existed throughout human history until very recently as a phenomenon, as a thing. And what I mean by that is, you were a child or you were adult, you were responsible. It wasn't like there was this thing in the middle that we have today. And I think one of the reasons why that is because of schooling. So I guess in the past, you would learn your trade from your parents or from an apprentice or something like that. But as for going to a certain place, 9 to 5 or 7 to 1, or whatever the schedule is, just to learn for up to a decade, we could say. I mean, if you think about it, it's actually quite intense to think about it. Imagine spending a whole decade of your life just learning something. So that part, almost by definition, forms a new category. If you remove schooling, it's child and then work. There's just two categories. You're unable to work realistically, or you're now working and you have your own stuff. That's why you find examples of companions getting involved in jihad even, and they're like 13, 14, 15. Wow, you're in warfare because you're either young, you can't fight, or you're older, you can. And I guess, technically speaking, that's why historically there's always just been the two categories. But from another perspective, in terms of responsibility, from what Islam teaches us from responsibility, then we have a category called tamyiz. So I guess you have before tamyiz. So tamyiz, what is tamyiz? Tamyiz is, I would say, the beginnings of aql, the beginnings of intellect. Aql, intellect, having the ability to understand, to know right and wrong. There's no switch that you switch and then that's it, you know. It doesn't happen that way. It's something that comes over time. It's an emergent property over time. There's no one. It's like saying, there's no one point. So it's a spectrum of gradually getting to a point where by now it's there. Which is why tamyiz is the beginning of understanding. You're just beginning to understand that this is right, and you're being taught that this is wrong. So at that stage, you get rewarded if you do something, for Allah, worship Allah or not. You get rewarded. It's written down. But in terms of sins, then there's an udhr. It's not, the angels don't write it down because it's not sure yet what's happening. No one knows. You don't know. I don't know. No one knows how do you treat this person. But Islamically, we have a next stage, which is called Bullock or baligh, someone who has now reached the age of puberty, you could say, or reached the age of accountability. And what's interesting about the first category, tamyiz and bulugh, that tamyiz is just an age, 7. What I sometimes tell people, when these two teeth fall out, that's usually tamyiz, because that's like age of 7. Whereas bulugh is a sign. It's not an age. It's something you have to look for, indicating that it has that accountability has begun, not that your aql has begun. Does it make sense? The difference between the two. So you're being accountable for something, and understanding and having full aql is not the same thing. You could possibly have had full aql before bulugh, but we don't know that. And Islam's rules and regulations are built on measurable things. It's very important. This is a very important principle in Islam. Everyone should recognize this. If you can't measure it, how can we judge it? I have to measure it. Even when it comes to like Bani Qurayza, when the tribe of the Yahud in Medina, when they tried to work with the mushrikeen to get behind the trench, and all to be punished and whatnot, all the men to be punished and not. One of the companions, who later became a companion, who was at the time from Bani Israel, they didn't know what to do. Is he a boy? Is he a man? How do we know? It was decided to look. Does he have any pubic hair? Is there a sign of bulugh? They looked. They found he didn't have it. Therefore, he wasn't executed. You have to measure it. So bulugh or puberty or thing is in Islamic speaking, when it comes to accountability, is something measurable, and there are 3 to 5 signs. One of them is, like we mentioned, pubic hair. Once the hair starts to grow in the armpits and the private parts, that's it. It's bulugh. You're now fully accountable. Meaning, something in your body hormonally has begun that's led the hair follicles to now grow in those areas. Now, this is a hormonal thing. This is a internal workings of the body. We can't have access to that. We can only see the signs of it, which is just hair. Another one is a wet dream, meaning that if a boy or a girl wakes up and they've had a dream of shahwa, which has led to the coming of semen, that is an example of bulugh. That will only happen if certain chemical things are happening in the body, which indicates the changes have begun. And if none of those two has happened, then 15. Because by that time, that's it. That's like the akhir had, that's the last thing. Even if for some reason you haven't had none of those two signs happen, then 15, that's it. And I don't mean 15 Gregorian time, I mean Islamic time. So I guess that's probably like 14, just shy of 14 or 14 in Islamic calendar. But 14 in the Gregorian calendar. No, start again. So 15 in Islamic calendar, which would be probably just slightly more than that in the Gregorian calendar, I think it is, if you actually add it up. Because the Islamic years are shorter by 11 days. So it might be 15 and a half in the Gregorian calendar. Anyway, whereas if you're a girl, there are additional 2 signs. One is the coming of the cycle, the monthly cycle. That's obvious. Again, something in the body has happened that has caused you to now have your cycle. And that cycle indicates other changes, which is the point which part of our discussion here. The other changes in the head. This is the issue. There are changes in the body, which indicates changes in the head. That we can't measure this, but we can measure that. It's almost like imagine if you have a son, and sometimes when you go to your friend's house, sometimes with the men, sometimes with the women. But how do you know if his eye is open now and is now looking? How do you know? Hormonal things will happen, that certain things will be revealed to him that weren't revealed to him before. You already know that through those hormonal signs. And obviously, if a girl is pregnant, that's clear cut. That whatever you didn't know, now you know. So these are the signs of what's called bulugh, or you're now accountable for your deeds. And I would say that would be the beginnings of puberty, which is hormonal. Basically, puberty would be, the best way to describe puberty would be that physical transition between the body of a child to a body of an adult. And like we said, just like the transition of the aql takes time, the transition of the body takes time. Or vice versa. The transition of the body that takes time means the transition of the aql takes time. And interestingly enough, scientists have discovered that during puberty, the brain itself goes through physical changes. Because we think, oh, you're learning, there's new things you learn when you grow up. But the changes in puberty is more deeper than just learning and being educated. Your brain is physically being changed. So imagine if your own brain's being physically changed, that will obviously change your behavior, change everything, and that's essentially what we're discussing. So why is this important for Muslims? So primarily it's important because, number one, we want to know when our deeds are being recorded. That's a very important lesson to teach your children. That there's going to come a day, when they're young, you teach them there's going to come a day whereby all your deeds are being recorded. So you need to make sure that beforehand you're ready. Beforehand you're prepared for this life of obedience to Allah. When you're young, you're a bit more free, but be ready. There's going to come a time where there's, salah in the masjid, there's hijab, there's hajj, there's things, there's zakat, well, zakat is always, but there's things that needs to be done. This is why that's important to us, number one. But number two, understanding. If I said to you, actually not if, I said to my friend the other day, I said, he's obviously got married and I was giving advice about having children and blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, brother, remember, the first couple of months when your wife is pregnant, have understanding that she's not herself. If you understand that there are things going on in the body that's going to affect, to the detriment of the person, their thinking, that will help you be understanding in your dealing with them. So just like a woman who now has an entire human being growing. I mean, if you think about that, that's one of the most drastic changes you could ever have in your life. A whole insan, a whole person is now being formed from cells to now a moving baby. That's no doubt going to mess with your brain. It's going to mess with everything. It's going to mess with your emotions, your behavior, your eating, everything. If you know that, you can prepare. Say, okay, she's more upset than usual. It will pass. Her patience is less than it used to be. It will pass. She has more cravings. It will pass. It will pass. You have more understanding. So likewise, if your child, who you know is growing up, is always asking questions, Abby, can you do this for me? Can we play? Can we go football? He's always excited. All of a sudden, oh, why are you talking to me for? Oh, why am I have to do chores for? But why? It was always complaint. If you understand that literally that child brain is now being squished and mushed and turned upside down until eventually it comes out the other end nice and working and functioning, then you realize that stage in between, as I like to describe, is wrecked. It's messed up. And you have to have patience for it. But that's the point. That's one of the reasons why that's important for us to know, especially as a Muslim. Another key point to function or focus on, from a parent's perspective, is that puberty...
Before we hit that, we're going to take a break.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Join us, inshallah, after this short break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Just before the break, you were about to mention something from the parent's perspective.
Yeah, so another aspect of which is why puberty, or understanding puberty is important for parents, is that puberty is where you set the scene. Meaning, how is your child going to behave and be as an adult is deeply woven within how he is treated or how he behaves as a teenager. As in what they do that stage, as in they're very, you could say, the word, there's a word they use. They've used plastic, I think they use the word plastic. I think they use the word they use is plastic. They're very malleable, that's the word. A teenager's mind is very malleable. It can be shaped and formed in many different ways. Hence why I'm sure some parents maybe have experience of having a child who's very good, he's very respectable, is whatnot. He got to a teenager, he starts to go through changes, he met a bad friend, and now all of a sudden he's this, reckons he's a rude boy, he's a thug or whatnot. How did this young, nice boy change so drastically? Because that stage is easily malleable. It's highly unlikely that you're going to have a well-respected, righteous, good, family-loving, family-going 40-year-old who's going to turn to be a gangster. And that doesn't happen. So that stage is so important, because that stage sets the stage. That level, or that stage sets the scene for what's to come, which is why it's so important. Even one brother mentioned to me about his children, how he mentioned that he's got 2 boys. One is just beginning the age of teenager, and the other one is still in primary school, kindergarten. So he wanted to take his older son is in school in the UK, and he's got a younger one, but he wants to take his younger one out of school because of the whole agenda that the governments are pushing to the kids now. He wants to protect his kid. And I said to him, but bruv, it's the opposite. It's the older one you need to worry about, not the younger one. The younger one, you won't even notice half of the stuff. He probably even, if all they've been bombarding these ideas, he probably goes in and just goes out. All he's interested in is toys, playing games, sweets, and staying up late. That's all he's interested in. It's the teenagers you have to worry about. Hence why, even in university specifically, that's where the mind really takes shape. The person goes one direction. So it's really, parents need to really focus on that stage. When they're young, they're young. Even some people ask me about homeschooling. Should I homeschool my kids? My kid is 5 years old. Should I homeschool them? I said you could, but they're still very young. I mean, the effect is actually quite minimal, as in the difference between the two. Whereas when they get older, that's a different thing altogether. And lastly, last point why this topic of puberty is so important to a Muslim, and Muslim parents specifically, I would say is captured so perfectly in the hadith. سبعة يظلهم الله في ظله يوم لا ظل إلا ظله. 7, whom Allah will shade in His shade, the day where there's no shade but His shade. One of them is شاب نشأ في عبادة الله, a young child who's raised upon the worship of Allah. Like I said, set the scene. Why is it? Think about it. I mean, if you look at all 7 of these individuals, actually, these 7 people, if you actually understand, if you look at all of these scenarios, why they were shaded in Allah's shade and no one else? Because it's so difficult. If you understand it's so difficult, then you understand what it means to have a child raised upon worship. Because it's so difficult. Their minds are somewhere else. If you actually achieve a child who wants to worship Allah at that age, thank Allah. Thank Allah in sujood. Because it's difficult to achieve that. You find, I mean, everyone who's had a child would know. When the child are young, when they can just barely speak even, they see you praying, they want to pray with you. I mean, I remember one of my kids made Sharjah while still standing. I mean, that's how the body was led. The head was on the ground, but it's still standing. They just want to follow what you're doing. They see what you're doing, they run around, then they do Sharjah, they do ruku, and then they run around again. They just copy. And then when they get to 7 years old, they want to go and they want to do Quran, they want to do the kind of stuff, they want to copy. As soon as they hit the teenager age, they want to do something else. Because it's such a difficult stage. They want to explore, they want to do things themselves. So it's so difficult, whereby number one, I think parents need to really start thinking, even before their child reaches puberty, what can they do to prepare for that time? I don't think really many parents really understand that moment, that stage. It is really, I mean, from your perspective, I'm not sure if you have any teenagers, but was you prepared for it when it came to you?
Probably not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I haven't suffered as maybe as some parents have, but of course we've all suffered to some extent. So
I mean, I want to say this is punishment. I'm not trying to scare anyone to say, oh, that being a teenager is torture. I'm not saying that, but at the fundamental level, it's essentially where that child you thought you knew is now someone else. And I think fundamentally it's that gradual learning that you don't have that influence you used to have. I think that's probably what it is. It's that gradual coming to terms as a parent that the influence you thought you had over your child, but you can tell them something, they would listen, is gradually waning and it's gradually going away until some point they're their own thing. You can tell them, and you're just a voice amongst voices.
I think it was, if I remember correctly, I think it was a saying of Ali radiallahu anhu that in regard to children, like for the first 7 years, like play with your children,
Yeah.
and then the next 7, educate them. And
Yeah.
then the next 7, so 14 to 21, be their friend.
Yeah.
Because this is, as you would have experienced, this is where sometimes it's not the right thing to be like very dictatorial or
Yeah.
be like a, do this, don't do this, why you know, because they're already at a stage now where the hormones are kicking in, they're acting different, they may be a bit, quote unquote, rebellious behavior wise.
Yeah.
So when you both push like this, come to a clash,
Yeah.
you know, one of you has to give way, or the
Yeah.
relationship can be damaged.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that I've tried. I'm sure we all fall short, but I've tried to kind of implement that, and I've noticed it does make a difference when you go to them and you say to them, "Look, I understand this is a stage in life, you know, A, B, C, D," rather than saying, "What are you doing, haram?" or "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?"
Yeah.
There's a big difference.
I mean, even what you described there is perfect, because that stage, that second stage, we mentioned that middle stage of 7 onwards, whereby you educate them and you tell them and you know, I think that's a problem, because parents do that, but don't know when to stop that. So it kind of continues. So when you go to the stage now where the last stage we says to play with them or be their friend, or be their companion, you're still in that stage where you're telling them, and we should be in that stage. So that's why it's important, because we want our child to be on the ibadah of Allah, and understand as a fact, everyone has companions, and everyone is on the religion of their companions. So if your child has friends, and and if you don't have a say in who their friends are, then essentially you have no say in where they go. I mean, that will probably, if I was to give a parent one advice, just one, if they said, what is the one thing that I can do to help guide my child in the right path? His friends. That would be the most conclusive, important thing ever, his friends. If you could be that friend, even better. But if you can't be that friend, at least make sure that who are his companions are good companions. Because I guarantee you, every person watching this show who has maybe had a period of their life where they went astray or they went haywire, I can almost guarantee at some point friends were involved in that. And when I say friends, it doesn't have to be like a bestie or a best friend, but associates, people they're with, their influence around them, they're the ones who led them astray. It's actually funny, because whenever even my kids, when they come out to me and say, "Oh, Abby, I want to do this," almost always my first question is, who else is doing that? Because it's highly unlikely that they came from the idea themselves. Someone said something and they heard it, oh, that's a good idea. Then they want to do it. I'm not saying people can't innovate or have new ideas, but that's not the norm. It's not normal for your child to have new ideas all the time. What is normal is that they hear things and then they want to do. Someone said something, let me do that. They saw something, let me do that. So friends, companionship, who they are around is so important. So just quickly, what are some of the challenges dealing with kids? We kind of touched upon some of them already, but what are some of the specific challenges we have dealing with teenagers? Number one, as we know, hormones. Hormones, for those who don't know, are chemicals in the body that give other parts of the body signals. So essentially, how does my hand, or how does my brain, or how does my heart, how does my liver, how does it communicate with other parts of the body? Hormones. They're basically messages throughout the body. And essentially, if your brain needs to communicate to your body, start growing this way, start doing that, it needs to release hormones. But obviously, that same hormone that grows hair in your chest, that same hormone that makes your hips grow this way, also affects the way you view certain things. And more importantly, it's a new thing to deal with that you have not dealt with before. As in, your brain, from the moment you were born, was functioning a certain way. It knew how to do certain things a certain way. Now you're growing up, now your body is changing, your brain is now in a new environment. And realistically, it hasn't really learnt, or hasn't really developed how to adjust in that environment. So therefore, there comes that transition stage. Another challenge, which comes from being a teenager, are ideas. New ideas. Like I said, before teenager, your child is essentially a carbon copy of your parents. Whoever the parents are, or the guardians are, whoever they spend time with, whoever they are, the child is. But when they get to teenager age, they want to explore new ideas. They want to change. They might want to see this and see that. That's a challenge, because now you have to address that. Abby, we all grow on this way, but they do something else. Why is that? We have certain questions.
Oh, the why questions.
The why questions.
You always see, like in the, I guess as growing up as children, we see in those movies or something where the father's driving the car. And, Dad, why? He answers, but why? And it goes on and on for like 10 minutes. Which in reality, there is some reality to that as well.
Well, I mean, human beings are always inquisitive creatures, alhamdulillah. And I think the first stage is the inquisition, or the why. And if you actually look at the scenario in the car, that's usually associated with a young kid, maybe at time of Tamiz, 7 onwards or whatnot. They're asking why. But if you analyze that thing, first, you realize that they're asking you why. Whereas a teenager, they're not asking you why anymore. The why is still there, but now they're asking others. That's a challenge. It's essentially what it is. And I guess part of that challenge, that which increases that challenge in this day and age, is social media.
I was actually going to say that to you now, but like nowadays they'll go onto the internet or to social media platforms and look for answers, and those answers many a time are wrong, but they sound really convincing.
Well, so here is a really, really deep part to analyze. In the last 50, let's say 100 years. Let's just say 100 years. That's a big ballpark figure. We, as human beings, have a medium that we never had before. TV, even radio, and now on phones. The means for someone across the world to peer into your private abode and talk to you and communicate with you. Before you had to go somewhere.
Just going to hold you now because it's time for a break. Join us, inshallah, after this short break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. Before the break, you mentioned the point that before, if you want certain things, you had to go to that place.
Yep. So, I heard there's a person in Mecca, he claims to be a prophet. I want to find out about it. So I get my marahil, I get my camel, I get my provision, I get on the back of the camel and I travel. And I spend days, maybe even weeks before I get to see the person. I have to find the person, I have to sit down the person and I have to see, is the person the messenger of Allah? For example. That was how you accessed knowledge back in the day. Rihla, travel. I mean, even we have examples of the Salaf, the early generations of Islam, traveling far for one hadith. Now you can download the app and search hadith with word search. Everything has changed. And what we are experiencing now, even psychologists are recognizing, is that we are actually witnessing mental illnesses that we never had before. There are even examples of certain countries. For example, there was one country, not mentioning the name, but there was a country whereby statistically it was unknown, the idea of anorexia, or someone not eating, or thinking that they are fat when they are not fat. It was not a known thing until they pinpointed there was a moment where a person became known, I think on the news, that they starved themselves to death. They literally just didn't eat until they died. And then from that moment, over a period of 3 years, it began to expand like a virus. And they postulated that, I believe, and Muslims, I guess, I believe that Islam even teaches this, but they postulate that ideas can behave like viruses and actually spread like a virus, whereby a nation or a group of people would never even contemplate certain things or certain ideas on certain things until one person mentions it, and then it becomes 2, and then it becomes 4. I don't mean ideas in terms of beliefs, like I believe this and so on. We just mean think of it this way. The idea that you look in the mirror and you think that this person who is basically skin and bone, they say, yeah, they're too fat. They're overweight. And they continue under-eating until they die. You think that's irrational, that's illogical. Why would you think that? But like I said, it behaves like a virus. It's almost like a mental infection. And social media, and when I say social media, I shouldn't really say social media. I would say the tools of media. That's probably better, because it's not just social media. It could be TV. Is that social media? I don't know. It could be anything. Cinema, whatever it is. But these things actually can spread mental diseases, which makes raising a child even more difficult. Which is why I do not recommend people to allow their child to have a smartphone without any restrictions. So, for example, there are certain brands of phone that have inherent within it parental guidance, that you can actually prevent certain applications, or you can prevent certain apps. So maybe you say to your parent, the parent can say, okay, here's the phone, calls, texting, whatnot. But as for this social media app, and that social media app is just known for certain things, then you can't have access to it. These are some of the things that certain tool the parent can use to try and preserve their mind. Because like I said, the mind is setting the scene for what's coming later on. If a child's mind is infected now, that they can carry that later on. And one very clear example, this is probably the clearest and most visceral examples of this, is homosexuality. There are many people say, oh, homosexuality, you're born with it and blah, blah, blah. No. There are many homosexuals who clearly pinpoint moments in their life when they were young that triggered this whole thing. And because when they were teenagers, they fed the idea, it grew. There are things people are exposed to that leads them in a certain direction. And one of those things, which is the next point, which is very important for parents to come across, which is something parents don't think about. They kind of think the child is free from it. They kind of think the child won't know about it. I don't know what parents think. I mean, even me, I don't know I can't remember what I thought or think or whatnot. But if you look at this topic here, most people don't realize it until it may happen, and then it's too late. And that's the issue of pornography. It's actually interesting that, I mean, sometimes people associate a person with homosexual tendencies or behaviors as being associated with being with childhood molestation, for example. Maybe when they were young, they were molested, or they experienced certain things by individuals that led them in that direction. But it's not always that way. Some people were just exposed to pornography at an age when their mind couldn't process that, and then it led them into other things. I mean, just an example. I mean, I always mention this example as a funny example. When I was in primary school, I was probably about 9. I don't know. It was probably about 9. And I had a friend, quote unquote. I don't think I call him a friend, but I had a friend in primary school. I don't know what happened. We had an argument, and he said to me, "You gay lord." That's what he said to me. That's what he said to me. I looked at him and I thought, what the heck is that? I had no idea. The idea never occurred to me, to the point whereby he used the word and I didn't even know what it meant. It took years later in secondary school, which is now, I mean, I'm now into teenager, when I was informed of such behavior, now I understood. Because I wasn't exposed to it. But the question is, how did he know about it? How was this 9-year-old know about this? Because you're exposed to it. So back to the point is that pornography is one of the most damaging things that can happen to a child. One of the most damaging things that can happen to an adult even. That's to the point where there are so many non-Muslims today who are advocating for its banning, who actually have therapy, who are actually suffering constantly because of it. And the joke is there are actually physical and medical repercussions, which is actually ironic, which comes as a result of abuse of pornography. And it's ironic because no one would actually associate in their mind looking at something can change you physically, can damage you physically. I mean, if I told you, looking at this plant on this table would cause you to go blind. You'd be like, don't be stupid. That's dumb. That makes no sense. Why would looking at something damage me physically? Beyond looking at the sun. Why would that damage you physically? But actually, things like pornography actually damages you physically, specifically the brain. There are actual studies that have been conducted to analyze the brain of a porn addict. And they've noticed there are actual physical changes that have happened in the brain, which shows how damaging that would be to a child's brain who is still developing. Remember we just mentioned a minute ago, we mentioned how in puberty the brain is actually physically changing. Up to about 20 years old, whereby 21, I think they say 20 to 21 years old, whereby those physical changes from a baby to an adult has completed. And essentially after that your brain is how it is. So imagine amongst that changes happening, you're damaging it. I mean, it's almost like there's a certain culture in Eastern Asia whereby they get women's or girls' feet and they tie it up. As in, maybe their foot is normally a size 5, they tie it so they can make it a size 4, or they squish it. So as they grow, the feet gets deformed. I mean, there's even another tribe, there's actually a tribe where they actually get a baby and they wrap the baby's head, so the baby's head can be grown deformed so they can beg. The point is, imagine as your brain is growing and developing, you're actually damaging it physically. Which indicates why or how damaging this thing is. But what's important is for parents to understand, what is pornography? Is it just witnessing or engaging in what is classically called pornography? Because from an Islamic perspective, it encompasses all of the act, even if it's inside mainstream movies and shows. And I think this is where the subtlety comes, where parents, they think that the pornography is in that hardcore stuff, or that other stuff that you get on the internet, not on so-and-so TV show from X country, or so-and-so film that happens from X company that has multiple big high budgets. But pornography happens at all levels. Hence why Islam, number one, Islam actually has so many protections from this. Number one, it's not allowed for a man to look at the awrah of another man. I can't look at your private parts. We're supposed to cover ourselves. Muslims across the globe all wear baggy clothes to protect the awrah, to protect the private parts. Why is it? Thing is it to protect the private parts from wind? Nope. Is it protect your body from dust? Nope. Is it protect your eyes? It's to protect your eyes. Think about it. When Adam ate the fruit, what was the first thing that happened? He saw the awrah. And what's the first thing he did? Tried to cover it. Yet you have people who want to remove the covering. And if you think about it, that's actually, if you just back on that point there, this actually reveals, listen carefully everyone, this actually reveals who is behind pornography. Iblis. No. He wanted to reveal to Adam his sawat, his awrah. So what is he doing today? He wants to reveal to everyone the awrat al-nas. People's private parts, their secret things. What's the purpose of hijab? What's the purpose of abaya? It's to protect the eyes. Why is it so many girls are feeling insecure about their own bodies? Why so many boys are feeling insecure about their own bodies? Because they've seen other people's awrat. Would you care about how your body looks if the only body you see is your own? You're normal. If everyone walked around in thobes and baggy clothes or lungis or whatnot, you don't know. And that's one of the biggest things that can happen. That one of the damages that happens is, number one, insecurity. And from insecurity, what's the next stage of insecurity or bodily insecurity? Body mutation. I now need to make this larger, make this smaller, cut this thing here, cut that part off here, remove this piece here, change that piece here. Why do you want to change your body? I want to be like this body. You wouldn't think that if you never saw it. So this is from the many things or challenges we have as parents, and this is why as parents we need to make sure we do all we can to protect the eyes of our sons and daughters, and that primarily, I would say, as a conclusion, that primarily begins and ends. Well, not ends, but begins with the TV and the phones. Probably even more the phones actually now, because TV, people watch what everyone watches, but the phones, people watch what no one watches. The phones is what you is now become the secret TV. The people watch the private stuff. So it's important for parents to be aware of the dangers that are there, be aware of how damaging these things can be and why it's so damaging, and most importantly, to have understanding that they're going through this stage. You need to help them navigate this transition. Just like you help someone navigate how to go from A to B, and inshallah, when they get to the end, they come out good and righteous people of the ummah. Inshallah ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair for sharing that with us.
Jazakallah khair, hayyakum
And
Allah.
also for the viewers and parents and whatever it may be at home, some good tips there, inshallah. And inshallah, till the same time, same place, next week, inshallah. I leave you as always with the greetings of Islam, the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.